Hey there, it's Kevin again. Welcome back to my kitchen. Tonight for dinner we are going to make a pretty simple but delicious recipe. It is chicken breast served with brown gravy and mushrooms with a side of garlicky mashed potatoes and sautéed kale. So, for this recipe, what you will need is you'll need your chicken breast, which is thawed. I have that right over here in a bowl that is in just in some water, and it's thawed out. You're going to need kale, garlic, potatoes, salt and pepper, some crushed red pepper. I'm going to use some of my chicken stock and some mushrooms, which I haven't pulled out of the fridge yet. Anyway, I'm going to kind of do this video in real time. Should take about a half hour or so. You can kind of see how I time everything out. So the first thing I'm going to get started on is making my mashed potatoes. I just got back from the grocery store, and you'll remember in the last episode I was talking about finding the discount vegetables and stuff in the produce section. So here is a pack of potatoes, which I weighed. It's about 2 pounds. Cost me 99 cents. Now these potatoes normally are 99 cents a pound, and you can see on it, it was packed April 27th, which is today's date. So if you had bought these last night, you'd have paid full price. Today, half price. And I want you to see as we cut into them, you know, how nice they are. Potatoes, I'm not going to peel my potatoes. The potato itself, the peel is so full of vitamins, and it's really healthy. So you want to make sure that you give all of your potatoes a good rinse in the sink to get rid of any excess dirt, but I am not going to go to the trouble to peel away all that healthy peel. So I'm cooking for just my wife and I, and I'm making mashed potatoes, so that should be plenty. That's actually probably going to be a little bit more, but with something like mashed potatoes, they don't cost a lot to make, and there are plenty of other things I can use them for if I have leftovers. So I always err on the side of making a little extra. So just got some warm water, rolling them around, running my hand over them all, giving them a good little hand job so that they get all of their dirt. Here we go. Rinse that off. That's the pot they'll be going into. Okay. So, since we're not... Okay. Okay, so again, I'm not peeling my potatoes. I'm just going to use them as is. When I'm cutting these potatoes up for the purpose of making mashed potatoes, the one thing I want to make sure is that I keep all of the pieces consistent in the size, so they cook at an even pace and at the same rate. And also, I'm gonna cut them kind of small, because the bigger the chunk of potato, the longer it takes to cook through and to boil. So let's go smaller. So, like I showed you last time with the onion, first thing is I'm just gonna make a nice tight little cut here to create a flat surface. Turn it over. I'm gonna do one more cut. So I have 2 flat surfaces on either side, and then I always, on this, will go with the larger flat surface. That just makes it more firm, right? It less likely to slide. Here's a little wiggly. Here is okay. So we're going to, once we have it down like that, I'm just going to cut each section in about a 1/2 inch for each one. If you are a novice and haven't seen my last video where I get into depth explaining how to use a chef's knife and what to look for, I would recommend that. Just using the proper technique. And you can see there, look at that. Do you see anything at all wrong with that potato? I see it this one little bit right there, one little bit of brown, and I paid half price for that. So you want to cook well, cook on a budget, keep your eye out for those kind of things. So after I have my potatoes cut that one way, I'm going to get a stack of them and lay them flat, and I'm going to turn them, and I'm going to do the exact same thing again. Now I'm going to go against the grain. So we're gonna go one more cut, about a half inch, but right about there. So I'm going to make that cut. And as I pull the knife back, I'm going to kind of just make sure that everything stays in place. I'll do one more cut, just like that. And now I'm going to turn it again. So at this point, let me show you what we have. What we have are French fries. I mean, that's a French fry right there. But the next step, what we have, is we're going to do half-inch cut again, but we're going to go all the way back. So, and now we've gone from French fries to these little cubes. And you see how they're all the same size? So you take those little cubes, and in the empty pot, they're going to go. I'm not forgetting my edges here. These guys, you know, I'll have to do them themselves, but however many potatoes you have, as long as they're laying down on a flat surface, you do as many as you can do safely. And we're just doing half-inch cut by half-inch cut by half-inch cut, and that gives you these little cubes. Okay. Okay, so I've cut up all of those 4 potatoes, and you see they're all uniform in size. And just for the record, that's all I got of those 4 potatoes, and here, that is all the waste. Those are the little bits of brown that got me a 50% discount on these potatoes. So now that the potatoes are cut and cubed, I'm going to run them under some cold water. I guess it doesn't have to be cold. Warm is fine too. But we're going to do this a couple of times. We're just going to kind of let the water run. And once you've got them covered, just plenty, I'm just going to drain off. See how the water is kind of white and cloudy? That's excess starch that we don't want, and any bits of dirt we might have missed or anything else, little bits of peels, you know, to get it all out. Try not to lose any. If you prefer, you can always run it through the strainer, which why don't I? I was just using that strainer, so just a couple of times. You see each time that it's getting less cloudy. So you want to be draining that water off until it is completely clear. One more time ought to do it. Back in the water it goes. Move it around with your hand. Okay, that's great. You'll see when I pour this out. It's much clearer. It doesn't have to be completely clear, you know, but it's good. I don't have to get it all out. So now that I've done that a couple of times, now I'm just going to get enough water to cover the potatoes. Not too much more. The more water that you have in there, the longer it'll take to boil, to get to boiling. And I start with hot water. I want to have enough. I don't want to run out of water, but I don't need too much. Set it on my stove. Set it to boil, so I set it on high. Now, because I have a limited amount of space in my kitchen here in New York City, a while ago I threw out all of my lids for my pots and my pans, but you definitely want to put a lid on something when you're trying to get it to boil, because putting a lid on it just makes that happen faster. So what I'm going to use is I'm going to use my 15-inch cast iron skillet, because I'll be using that later. So I'm just going to sit that skillet right on top and just let that heat in there collect. And see these little bits, that leftover bit? I'm still even going to use that. That'll end up in my frozen stuff for my stock. So the next thing we want to get started is going to be our chicken in just a moment. But I'll just get into my garlic. So for tonight, there's going to be garlic in the mashed potatoes, and there's going to be garlic in the kale. So I'm going to use all of it. I'm going to use a full small bulb. Should get me through. And if you watched the videos in order, the last video I shot, I taught you all about garlic and how to tend with it. So I'm just gonna do this part off camera, where I get rid of the paper and get them crushed. I'll show you how to do it once or twice. The garlic is going to be used for my kale, is going to be crushed, and the garlic that's going into my mashed potatoes is going to eventually be crushed. It'll be mashed up with them. Okay. So for my mashed potatoes, I used 4 potatoes, so I'm going to use I think 3 cloves of garlic should be enough. And then the rest, that'll be a good amount for my kale. So, okay. This is called a crepe pan, and it is a nice flat surface. It's a small, basically a small skillet. It's good. I'm going to use this to toast my garlic. So what I'll do is we set the crepe pan on, some heat under it, and I want to use some extra virgin olive oil. Not a lot, just enough to cover the bottom. Just enough to cover the bottom. Remember, you can always pour more. So I'll give it a shake or two. Okay, the bottom is covered. Now, already I can just go ahead and do this. I'm just going to put my cloves of garlic right into that oil. In fact, I'll put it on my back burner to get it out of my way. We'll have to heat it medium, and we're going to check them every once in a while. We'll flip them over, and you're just going to see them start to toast up. You go to a restaurant, they say roasted garlic. There's 2 ways of doing it. You do it on a stovetop like this, or you can do them in the oven. I'll show you that technique some other time. The garlic that'll go into my kale is going to be chopped, so I'll just chop it up real fast. Just a rough chop. Doesn't have to be pretty. You just want it to be consistently sized. Okay. Okay. So I don't need this right away. So I'll just keep it up here off to the side. Okay. Alright, so it's time to get started on the chicken. Normally, I buy chickens whole, and I buy 4, 5, 6 at a time. You get a much better price per pound, and then I take them home and I bone them, cut them up into sections, and you end up, it's end up being a lot more economical, and different parts of chicken used for different things. Well, anyway, right now during the quarantine, oh boy. But right now during the quarantine, we don't have the liberty of buying whole chickens 4 or 5 at a time. So I take what I can get. These chicken breasts they were pre-frozen. They're skinless. They're fine. No problems with them. So all I'm going to do to get my chicken started, it's going to be cooked in this 15-inch skillet that I've been using as a cover temporarily. So I'm going to put the heat on under that skillet, and I'm going to let that start to warm up. And then in the meantime, we'll just cover our potatoes with another one. Alright, notice how your garlic is already starting to brown a little bit. You got the bubbling. That's good. Obviously we could do a lot more garlic in this pan if we needed to, but I'm going to flip them already. Let's make sure. Get a good shot on that. Okay, as you can see, it does not take long. We want to cook each side evenly, so we're going to flip them and look at that. See, they're already on the outside nice and tan. And that only took about 2 minutes, so we're going to do about another minute on the other side, and then my garlic will be done and I can set it aside. Meanwhile, my potatoes are cooking, and it's time for my chicken. So, first step for the chicken, we got this skillet getting warm. I'm going to use some extra virgin olive oil again. I'm not going to try to cover the whole bottom this time, just a little bit. Just a little bit, and then you just swirl it around the pan to try to get a really light glaze. I mean, I do want to cover the entirety of the bottom, you know, because I don't want my chicken to be sticking, but I don't want to add so much that it's too oily. Okay, I'm going to let that warm up. And meanwhile, I can see that I'm starting to get some smoke over here. And I can flip this over, and I see that those guys are good and done. So I'm turning that off. And, yeah, this is empty. I'm just going to pull the garlic cloves, put them in a little ramekin or a little bowl, save them for later. And I'm also gonna, okay. And I'll also just pour in that garlicky oil, because that oil has a nice flavor now. We don't want to throw it away. We're going to use it. So we'll just pour it right in. Let it sit there. Obviously it's very hot. Put the pan over in my sink, throw some cold water on it so it cools off. Meanwhile, this pan is good and hot. So I'm just going to take my chicken, each breast, drain any excess liquid off of it. These pre-frozen ones that you get from the store, I'm convinced before they package them, they like soak them overnight in excess liquid just to raise the weight of them. Because they do get quite a bit smaller as they defrost. Okay. And once they're in, I'm just going to sprinkle my salt and pepper, pinch right over the tops of them. Just a bit. Now we're not going to be cooking these chicken all the way through. What we're going to do is cook it on each side. And I can see over here, my potatoes are starting to boil. That's a great thing, so we'll just let them boil away. Alright. So, next to prepare, we'll prep our kale. This is kale. It's a wonderful superfood. Very healthy, leafy greens. Very good, very healthy, and it's a very hearty vegetable. It's not wildly expensive. You know, it's one of those things that people kind of, I don't know, it's a yuppie thing or something. It's just really good. So the first thing I'm going to do with this kale is I'm going to wash it. So I'll just bring it right back over to my sink. I'm going to throw it into here. I'm just going to run water all over it. Let it go for a bit. And then I'm just going to let it sit for a minute and start straining. And okay. Okay, so while my kale is straining off in the sink, I'm going to chop up some onions. I'm going to chop up some mushrooms. These are called white button mushrooms. They come in those plastic containers at the store. You have white button, and then you have baby portobello, and then you have full-size portobello. They're all the same mushroom, it's just different stages of growth. So they start white, then they get darker, and then they get big. We're just going to slice some mushroom. So, let's see if you can see that. Here you go. Just slice, just like anything else. I make my first slice to create a flat surface. Put the flat surface down, and then I just slice the rest. And I want nice uniform sized slices. only need about 5 or 6 mushrooms. When you buy your mushrooms at the grocery store, in these packs, they come in plastic and cellophane. When I bring them home, I take them right out of the plastic containers and I put them in a basic paper bag. The reason is that as your mushrooms age in your refrigerator, they're going to start to dry out, so they're going to be releasing some liquid. Now, inside of the plastic, that liquid has nowhere to go, and as a result, it's going to cause mildew and mold to happen much earlier. So you put them in all your mushrooms should always go in a paper container, never plastic. So that's about enough of those. I'm going to put them to the side. And let's take a look at our chicken. It's time to flip it. So the chicken, we're going to give it a quick flip. When you're working with stuff that's sizzling and whatnot, always flip and do anything away from you. That way, whatever oil touches down splashes that way and not back at you. Okay, we're going to let that cook for about another 2 minutes on that side. And in the meantime, I want to chop up a bit of scallion. I guess I didn't mention this at the beginning. This is a scallion. A scallion is kind of like a cross between an onion and garlic. Very popular in French cuisine. Very delicious. I mean, this is one of those things, I don't know, most people pretty much don't use. I don't know if they know what to do with it, but when you have a dish and there's been a scallion added, it puts it over the top. It's wonderful. So, just like garlic, just like onion, got to peel that paper off, that outer layer. And then I'm just going to cut it up really fine. Nice, really, almost like in Goodfellas where they slice the garlic with a razor blade. I'm going to make them really paper thin. I'm controlling the thickness of the slices by how far my hand that's holding the scallion down is going. Okay. So there you can see, even, very thin slices. And they're going to dissolve in not a lot of time when we put them in. Okay. So I'm just going to grab a dinner plate out of my cabinet here. Okay. Now, while the chicken and the potatoes are cooking, the potatoes should be pretty close to done. I'm just going to take this time to work with my kale, which I have washed and drained in the sink. So for this, I want the kale leaves, not the stalks. So I'm just going to, let's see, where are you? I'm looking at a viewfinder upside down also, so this is a little tricky. Let's see if we can go a little wider. There we go. So just grip the stalk and tear. Just tear it away, and I'm going to throw the leaves back into my strainer. I'm not going to discard this. There's a lot of uses for this. This is not garbage. Hang on to them. Doesn't take long. Just tear them all up. Some places will cook the kale. They won't even tear it. They'll just use the stalk and all. I mean, I find the stalk is a bit bitter, a bit tougher to chew, so I prefer to use it in stocks. or probably the next video I make, you'll see me use these actual ones in a vegetable slaw, which is delicious. So, I think this head of kale, I think it was about $2, I think. $1.50, $2, not expensive. Those potatoes today, well, let's see, that's not even the full thing. That's 75 cents worth of potatoes, $2 worth of kale, my mushrooms, my garlic, oh, probably $1 worth of all that. The chicken, that's probably about $3. So, and my chicken stock, which I'll show you, was absolutely free because I made it from all of my scraps. So if you bought chicken stock at the grocery store, it costs you $2, $3, $4. Or if you know how to make it at home, it literally costs nothing. Okay, so I've gotten all the stalks off. Now I've just got bits of my kale, so they can sit back. I'm not going to cook that yet. You see, I have my stalks, which I'll just hold off to the side because I'm going to use them down the road. I'm just going to put this off to the side too, so it's out of my way. Okay, now the chicken's been cooking. It's not cooked all the way through. When you cook chicken, you know, it has to be, by the time you're done, it has to be cooked all the way through. But it's getting tan on both sides, and I like that. I don't really want it to cook all the way through just yet. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to pull it off, and I'm going to put it onto just a dinner plate and let it sit for a few minutes, let it reserve. Meanwhile, I'm going to keep my pan going and warm, and I'm going to let all this stuff cook down so it all starts to get brown. Now, while that's cooking down, I'm just going to take a quick look at my potatoes, because I cut them small. They shouldn't take too long to cut. So I'll just pick one up, or one or two up with my clippity-clops here, pop it down, and if it's done, it'll just crush nice and easy right under with minimal amount of pressure. That's perfect. That's where you want it. So I turn off my water under the potatoes, and I have to find a bowl for my I'll have to use a bowl for my kale for a minute because I'm going to need that strainer real quick. So, kale out of my strainer. And then kale can come over here. Strainer's empty. This pot handle isn't hot. Sometimes metal can get very hot. I know this one would be very hot, but this not so much. So, still, it's a good idea to always use a pot holder. I just don't need it right now. So I'm just going to let this drain off for a minute. And just let it sit there. Okay, meanwhile, let's look at this. You see what's happening in this pan? You see all this brown? This is one of the secrets of cooking. This is the secret between a good cook and a bad cook. This is gold. So if you don't know what to do with this, this turns into what gets burned and stuck on a pan and ruins things. But if you don't let it burn, all it is just flavor. And it's to make a nice sauce to go with things. So what we're going to do, it's called deglazing a pan. So tonight, to deglaze a pan, what it basically means is while we're cooking, we're going to be cleaning all these giblets, all these little bits off the bottom, and we're going to use a liquid. So you can use water, but if you want to add more flavor, you use white wine, or this is my homemade chicken stock, which you can see I made on New Year's Day of this year. I'm just going to open up my chicken stock. Pop the top off. That's a nice sound. That means that I had a good vapor lock. Now, when you make a homemade stock, you always want to double check it because you never know. There could have been a flaw when you were canning it during the boiling process. So when I take the top off, it should be clean or wet. There should be nothing sticking off of it. That's perfect. And then you should also sniff it. And it really really shouldn't smell like much at all. If you get a sour smell, it's rancid. Okay, so you see now in our pan how everything is nice and brown. I'm just going to throw in a little bit of my stock, but I didn't strain my stock as much. In a restaurant, I would have strained it through cheesecloth and things like that. I just did it through a strainer a couple of times, so there's a bit of solids that collect. So instead of going to all that trouble, when I use it, I just pour it through a strainer one more time. So I'm not going to use a lot. I'm only going to use a couple of tablespoons, just enough to get some liquid going. So I pop it right on in. And as it's cooking here, I immediately just go little circles all around the pan. And I'm scraping every bit of everything that's stuck to that pan. I'm scraping it. I'm not stopping until I get every bit. Getting the corners, get everything. All around, okay? And now that I've done that, there you go. Give it another second or two. I'm gonna give a few more seconds just to let a little of that liquid drain off. And into the pan, after that, we'll go, that's about good, my shallots. Okay. Let's get the rest of my shallots in there. So right now it's not oil anymore, but that chicken stock, that liquid, will help keep things from sticking. We're going to be adding a lot more chicken stock soon, but not yet. So I'm going to stir things around. And as soon as you put the scallions, why am I saying scallions? Shallots. It's shallots. As soon as you keep putting the shallots in, it's going to smell different. It's a wonderful smell. But I cut them really small. And you can see they got translucent. They went limp really quick. That's what you want from them. So once they get to that state, I'll just hit them with some ground black pepper and some kosher salt, or I could just use my regular salt and pepper mix. I'm going to let that cook for a couple seconds more. And since we're making a sauce, I also should have mentioned you're going to need all-purpose flour. I got some all-purpose flour. I'm going to use about a tablespoon. And the all-purpose flour I'm going to put right in here. Yeah, that's about it. Nice heaping tablespoon. Okay, and I'm going to sift it right on in. And I'm going to stir that around. I'm going to let the flour coat everything. Get it mixed in. I'm going to add a little bit more liquid right here because I want the flour to dissolve. I want to create a bit of a slurry is what we would call it. It's all incorporated now. And that should be plenty of flour. The purpose of the flour is to thicken your sauce because the basis of your sauce is a liquid, and as the liquid dissolves, the flour it'll thicken up. So I let that go. Then I'm going to throw in my mushrooms. And I'm going to give them a couple seconds just to let them coat. That. We don't want anything to burn, but I do have a high heat going under here. So they're coated, okay. And now, yeah, that's about enough time. All right, now I'm going to take the rest of my stock and it's going to get poured right on in. So you notice the thicker stuff at the bottom. That's why I didn't filter out last time. So, I catch that. Okay, that's almost enough chicken stock. I'm actually going to crack open another one. Not going to use all of this, but I'm going to use probably maybe another half cup. Smells fine, so we're going to pour a little bit more in. And we're just going to let that come to a bubble. Give it a minute. Okay. Okay, so while that chicken is starting to bubble up, I just wanted to take a second to show you my herb garden that is in the front windows to my house. These are all things that I just bought at the grocery store, and I stuck them in some water until, see down here, until they start, that's basil, and it starts to grow its roots. Once the roots are about 2 inches and there's a shitload of them, you put them in dirt and you've got a new plant. So here I have basil, that's thyme, that's rosemary, more basil. I have over here, I have sage, up top. Now you can't really see those, but that's just more things that are trying to root. So we're going to take a little bit of sage and some rosemary and some thyme, and we're going to add them to the to that sauce for our flavoring. So I'm just going to cut off a couple of pieces. And cutting is great for the plant because it stimulates new growth. So that's 3. I'll do one more bit of sage, and then I'll cut off. You don't need to watch this. It's too difficult. Okay. Okay.
Are you filming?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'll take a shower then.
Yeah.
It's almost 9, you know.
It's 8:48.
I know, it just said it's almost 9.
I know. Thank you, Jelly. Okay. Alright. Okay, so from my herb garden, so can you see that? Yeah, from my herb garden, I have some rosemary, some sage, and some thyme. And these are all going to go into my chicken gravy. So, let's see. Okay, so here's how we do it. With the rosemary, it's kind of a piney smell. It looks like something off a Christmas tree almost. You peel down, and that pulls the leaves off. Just get all your leaves off there. The little twig is not necessary. The sage is good to go. I would just take the leaves of the sage and maybe make a little roll and chop it. And the thyme is just like the rosemary. You can just peel the leaves off. I don't mind even using just the stalk. So really the only thing you want to get rid of is the one piece of the rosemary that's kind of thicker than everything else. I'm just going to put them I've put them into a little pile here on my cutting board. Right there. Let's see, can you see it? Okay. So a little pile of herbs. I'm just gonna run my knife through it a couple of times. That's fine. And then into the pan, they're gonna go. Now there's no precise amount. I'm just kind of doing it by feel, by eye, by memory, by gut, by instinct. Also, up here on my stove, this is just a little bit of thyme and a little bit of rosemary. I think the last time I used some, I picked off too much, so it's just sat there drying. No waste. In it goes. All right. Okay. So now my sauce is boiling. Notice it's not thick yet. It's going to take a while. So in the meantime, once it starts boiling, I'm going to put my chicken directly back into the sauce. Whatever drippings it is let off into the plate. And that is about it. I mean, now it's just a matter of letting it sit. It's going to take at least another 10 minutes for that chicken to cook all the way through. Halfway between now and then, I'm going to flip them over. But what will happen is the liquid is going to just boil out of this. It's going to reduce, and the flavors will concentrate, and you're going to know it's done. I'll show you later when you can drag your spatula or your spoon through, and it does that parting of the Red Seas, and you're able to see the bottom of the pan. So in the meantime, since that's just cooking away, let's get back to our potatoes. So mashed potatoes, traditionally very simple recipe, right? It's some boiled potatoes. What else is it? Well, salt and pepper, butter, milk. So we're going to do something a little different because we're using, it's a roasted garlic mashed potato. So for this, I've already boiled my potatoes, right? They're good to go. They're still hot. It's been about 5 minutes. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes, but they're still hot. So I'm going to use a mixing bowl, a metal bowl, a large bowl. I have a KitchenAid stand mixer that I'll be using. If you don't have one of those, just a regular mixing bowl. Okay, so we get all of that in there. All right, into the bowl it goes. And the next thing we're going to do is, it's called ricing. And this is just where you just go in with something and just give them a little bit of an early mash. This way when you start running your whip through it, it's not picking up full chunks and throwing them. It just breaks it down a little bit. And at this point, if I were using butter, I would put my butter in here and let that start to melt a little bit. But I'm not using butter. I am using this beautiful crushed garlic as flavor. And instead of the butter, I'm going to use the oil that it was cooked in. So in everything goes. Remember, we didn't use a lot of oil. And we got that crushed garlic. Okay. Now I'm just going to do the same. I'm going to mash that garlic a little bit. Okay. Then we'll add some salt and pepper. And here's the salt and pepper. I added some kosher salt. But I don't have two hands to do pepper mill, so we're doing salt and pepper that way. Remember, you can add more salt later. You can't take any out at this point, so be a little conservative on that. Okay? And then I want to add a little bit of milk for a lubricant, but instead of milk I have some half and half, which is a bit thicker, so I'm going to use that instead of my low-fat milk. It'll make a bit sturdier of a mashed potato. This fucking thing. Okay. Alright. So, here's another... Okay, so here's another term. It's called a drizzle. It's not a specific scientific amount, but it's more than a drizzle. It's not a whole lot. So you don't want to make them too liquidy. You just want enough to make it all... Son of a bitch. Hold on. Okay. All right. Look at this. Our chicken is boiling away nicely now. You can see the steam coming off of it. All's well. All right. So we're just going to take our half and half into the potatoes. And I'm going to add a drizzle of it. That's not a lot. It's just a bit. It's probably enough. That was about a tablespoon. You put too much in, and it's just going to make your mashed potatoes runny. And at this point, all that's left to do is to mix these together. The more you mix it, the smoother they get. I'm going to do it over here on my stand mixer, but if you do not have a stand mixer, you can use a hand mixer, or you can just use a spoon. You know, it'll just take a little bit longer. But I'm using my mixer with a whisk attachment. Lock it in. Throw it on low first, just to get it started. And then I'm going to take a rubber spatula to wipe down the sides. Do that a couple of times. Okay, that's looking good, pretty consistent. See, the more you whip it and mix it, the smoother it is. So when you say, oh, somebody's, you know, their mashed potatoes were lumpy, those lumps are just chunks of potato that didn't get beaten down to a pulp. So they're pretty flavorless. Okay, there we go. The mashed potatoes are done. When I would make these in the restaurant, they would then go into a pastry bag and we would swirl them out on the plate and make them pretty, but they don't need that. I'm just going to give it a little taste test. I want to make sure it's salty enough. I want to make sure the flavor's there. Yeah, that's not bad. You can pick up the garlic. It's fine. I don't need any more salt. So I'm just going to let it sit there for a while. If I need, you know, if I needed to make those way in advance, I could. You can always just throw them in the microwave if you need to reheat them really fast. They're pretty resilient. Meanwhile, the chicken's cooking up nicely, so let's turn our attention to our kale, shall we? All right. Okay, so now on to the kale. I'm going to make sauteed kale tonight. I've already cleaned and torn my kale up into the size pieces I want. I'm going to be using a wok. You could use a skillet if you don't have a wok. A wok is a great tool to have in a kitchen. It's very versatile. There's a million uses for it. I make my popcorn in a wok. I make scrambled eggs in a wok. I make, obviously, all sorts of different Asian dishes. It's just a really inexpensive and great thing to have. So, extra virgin olive oil, not a crazy amount, just a little bit. I just want to make a little pool of it. I don't want things to get too oily. And I'm going to let that oil heat up just for a minute. And as soon as I've got it nice and warm, I'll be putting all that garlic that I chopped up in it. So let me get that in my hand. Clean my work surface. Okay. Here's the garlic. I'm just going to feel with my hand well above any surface. But I can feel the heat coming up. So I know it's almost there. Okay. All right, so what I'm doing is just to test the heat. I just got my hand, and it's about 6 inches over the bottom of the pan, and I can feel the heat coming up with my hand, but I'm not at the point where it's so hot that I have to pull away. But it's starting to get there, so I know that my oil's where I want it. So at that point, in goes the garlic with a nice little... You hear that? Just that nice little sizzle. Then also in that garlic, we will add some red pepper flakes. I grow my own red pepper. So I have this. I grow. These are little red peppers, which you would just chop up. But I also have red pepper flakes somewhere. Where the fuck are they? Where the fuck are my red pepper flakes? Oh, okay. I'd already pulled them out. Alright, I was ready to blame others. Okay. Alright, you see it's good and hot. Already you can see the garlic starting to brown. So real quick, I'm just going to throw in about a half teaspoon of red pepper flakes into that oil, stir that around, and then all of my raw kale goes in. Now at this point, it's going to be spitting and sputtering a bit. And that's just the excess water that's hitting the oil, but you want to give it a stir. Okay. So I want to stir it around, and the technique I'm using stirring is using my tongs. I'm picking up from the bottom, and I'm basically folding it over. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing that garlic from the bottom and that oil up to the top, so it's not cooking directly on the heat anymore. And the heat starts to wilt the leaves. The heat starts to wilt the leaves, which is what you want. We need a little more liquid in there. Now you can go with the olive oil route, but since I already have this chicken stock, that's a little healthier, a little more low fat. So I'm just going to use a little bit more chicken stock. It's going to cook off. And that's as simple as making the kale is. You're just going to let the heat, the liquid, that steam, is just going to wilt this down. It's going to take about 7 minutes. But that's all you need to do to it. I'll add some salt and pepper. Ground pepper, kosher salt, medium heat. Just give it a nice stir. Okay, so we're probably about 7 minutes away from dinner. As soon as the kale is done, we should be good. I'm going to go flip these chicken breasts one time. Let them cook on the other side. We got a real good boil going on over there. It's really going strong. That's what we want. You see how hard it's boiling? We just want that liquid to boil away. It's still too thin. It's still going to take some time. In the meantime, we're just going to let that sit. The potatoes are okay. The potatoes, even though they're going to be sitting for a few minutes, they're not going to cool down too much, and then the heat from the gravy and everything else will bring them right back up. So you don't have to worry about that. Anyway, that's how you do everything. I'll come back in a few minutes. We'll show you the finished product. Okay, so it's been about 7 minutes since I shut the camera off last. And you can see the kale now is all wilted down nicely. All that liquid I put in is gone. I got that garlic along the side that's toasty, so I'm turning off my wok. The chicken is done. Chicken's cooked through, and look, see that parting of the Red Sea? See how we can see it takes a second? So that means my sauce is at about 99% ready. So I'm going to start plating. Grab these potatoes. Here we go. So I'll just plate everything and then do the chicken last. And that'll give that sauce its last few moments to finish off. And here's how we do it. Okay, the potatoes. Just knock that whisk around till it's cleaned off. That's the way it goes. A quick stir. These potatoes have no butter in them. Remember, it was just olive oil, roasted garlic. So I'm going to put on each plate. Get a dollop of potatoes. If you want to do it fancy, you can put it in a pastry bag. Not fancy right now. This is a pandemic, right? This is no time for levity. This is no time to be fancy. Okay, there they go. Just to make my sauce special, the very last thing I'm going to put. Can you see this is butter? Not a lot. About a teaspoon of butter, and that's enough for two people. And this is just a little trick. I'm just throwing it in at the end, and it's just gonna melt, and it's just gonna make the sauce a little bit more silky, a little bit more smooth, and it's just gonna make it pop. It's amazing. Let's just let that melt in there. Take some kale, plate up the kale, and then I always try to leave a little extra in my pan, and that is because after dinner my wife does the cleaning, and she likes to have some what we call pickings, and that's just shit she can pick out of the pan and eat. Sometimes she has like a second meal of just pickings. Okay, so I'm going to bring a chicken over. Let's just put it right straight like into the potato. Put the chicken and a little piece. Set the camera back so that you can take a look here. There's a thing in these kitchens in New York. I just never have enough space. By the end of cooking, I have so much shit laying around. I really need a sous chef or a personal assistant. If anyone knows any young college girls that need a job as a personal assistant, let me know.
No.
Send headshots. Whatever. Alright, I'm turning off my sauce.